Yes, so how many of you got through the entire video set for your peer mentoring? If you can maybe use the raise your hand function on Zoom. I'd just like to get a sense of how many. And if you didn't, that's okay. We're going to go over some of the concepts here today. Okay, that's good. So about maybe half of you. Okay, so one of the things that this video training goes over is to really set aside some time for you guys to think about where you are in terms of the things that you absolutely need, the things that are maybe nice to have, and the values that you have. And so we have some wonderful colleagues from UCSF, Nalini Saul and Lawrence Clement, who are experts at helping students, navigate careers after a PhD. And they really advise starting with yourself, with knowing yourself and what are the things that you are essential for you. So needs are things that are essential to your well-being. Preferences are things that are nice to have. And values are those principles and standards that are basically part of your personal belief system. And so they advise starting with that as opposed to the skills and interests that you'd like to gain, because they really want you to center on the things that are core parts of your identity. Many times I think we kind of skip over this part and go straight to the skills and interests that you want to acquire. But that's really, kind of skipping over a really important part of, surveying what is it that you want to do for yourself? What is it that you want to accomplish in your career? So needs would be, things that you absolutely couldn't be without. It could be things that, are just important either for your health, for your ability to, to live. If you have children, it could be things like childcare. If you have a partner, it would be the ability for that person to also, have a position. They're just things that you would never be able to compromise, right? Preferences are things that would make things perhaps a little bit nicer, better, easier for you to manage. But when you rank them in a scale of priorities, they're not necessarily those things that you wouldn't be able to negotiate. And there might be also things that, you could think about adapting or modifying based on a particular context. So, for example, it could be salary. You would prefer a good salary, but you might be willing to take a lower salary if it's a position that's just temporary, transient, or that will give you a certain set of skills that will, prop you up for success for the next piece. And then values are just things that, you definitely would not be able to compromise on, and they're really belief systems. So, for example, if you don't believe in research with non-human primates, that might be a value that you would have to take into consideration as you think about the next step in your research, particularly if you're in a field where that's one of the models that's being used in research. So we're going to start with this, and we're hopefully going to go through this again. But before we get started, I would like to open the floor and ask people, why is it that knowing your needs, values, and preferences, why is it important for thinking about your next step? Why do you think this is where Naliti and Lawrence suggest that you get started?
Yeah, I think of values as kind of like your North Star, and it's always going to help guide the direction you want to go in. Um, and from what I'm recalling from the video, they emphasized this part of the process so much because we're often in a rush to like get to the goal, but if we don't first understand whether the goal is right for us, we could be kind of going down a path that we're later realizing it's not the right fit for us.
Definitely. Do you think that understanding your needs, values, and preferences could help you think about the immediate next step more critically as well?
I would just jumping in. I would say yeah, because one of the first things she talked about in the video was understanding that you have the right to have preferences, and it's like you don't have to just take what you think is whatever that opportunity is, so that you can keep progressing. Like, and that's kind of where my perspective personally was, and so I've done a lot of googling in the last couple of days since I watched the videos because it's like I didn't really think I had a choice. I guess I had a path that I thought I needed to follow, and you can kind of let yourself go in that, and then you end up in a career you're unhappy and kind of stuck there. And so I guess that's kind of like to add on to what was already said. I guess that's a good point why they were stressing doing it at this point because we're starting to make decisions.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Kiki.
I think it's also very similar to like you can't really help others until you help yourself. So kind of building that foundation of knowing your needs, your preferences in a professional setting is just as important as in like personal life. So that like others have said that you can set yourself up for success. And unless you're in a space of like being able to serve yourself first and then surround yourself with others that you want to have that sort of relationship or environment in, it doesn't make sense to accept what might be a societal norm in a work professional setting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think like all you said, and also sometimes we get into a path where that we've decided maybe a few years ago, and things might have changed. So it's really important to reassess these things periodically, and to not take what others say for granted. As Kiki says, really centering yourself and what it is you need as opposed to what other people are telling you is really important. Mihoka, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I did. Kind of just going off of what Josh said, but I felt like in my life I didn't really have a lot of choices in terms of professional life. Like I was in the job market during 2020, which is COVID, and so I just had to kind of rush to jobs that would take me, and they didn't have like the best conditions. So kind of hearing that you have a choice kind of empowered me, but also kind of scared me into thinking like, do I actually have a choice? A lot of times, like I've been handed things where I didn't have a choice but to accept it, or just like not have a job, or something along the lines of that. So it made me nervous to kind of realize that, and how strongly I should kind of stand by my values and things like that. And can I afford to do that? That's kind of the questions I got watching the videos.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the fact that you also have the preferences that you rank things in terms of, importance and need for you. It's also good. It gives you an idea of what things you could negotiate, what things you could maybe sacrifice in the short term for, either because you have a particular opportunity or because, like we talked about, it could be beneficial down the line. Sophia?
Yeah, I've been having, ooh, hold on. Okay, I'm back. I've had a couple of informal interviews with faculty, and I remember one of them, this ties back to this. I was like, well, like, when do you need this position to start? And he reminded me, like, this is a postdoc. Like, we shape it to what you need, or like the start date is like, which was wild to me because every time I'd apply to a position, it was like, grad school had a very particular date. And when I was like a research scientist, like they had to fill it within this month. So it was wild that he was reassuring me of like, no, at this stage of your career, like we get to negotiate what you need, and like the project and start date and like what this position looks like is according to what we craft. And I was like, what is this? What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's good to set aside some time to go through this activity. Somebody referenced COVID. I think, you know, during COVID, a lot of people had time to reflect, and I think that's why you saw a lot of like shifts in the job market. But you know, we're kind of getting back to where we were before 2020 and back into the rush of things. And so I think it's really important for you guys to set some time up to really think about what it is that you're looking for as you're finishing up your PhD and setting yourself up for the next stage of your career. So I believe we have our breakout rooms set up. So in the next 20 minutes, you should talk with your peer mentor about what you found out regarding your needs, preferences, and values, and you know, what process, you know, what considerations you had when you were ranking them, when you were thinking about which of those were negotiable, which of those were not. And then also discuss how those needs, preferences, and values have made you think about your current career trajectory. Have they changed your focus or your perspectives? Have they strengthened them? So that's kind of the conversation we want you guys to have. Great. So I think the breakout rooms are ready. Carolina's going to open them up in a little bit. I'm going to be sending out some reminders. You have the slides in your email. So if you want to take a look at these questions and the question prompts, check your email. And we'll see you back here around 7:40 Eastern time. Carolina, can you open up the rooms?
I opened them.
Oh, great.
I think, yeah,
Thank you.
they're open. Yeah, they just need to join.
Okay. See you guys soon. Okay. Carolina, did you start recording again?
Sorry. Oh,
Is it recording?
yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. I think we're all back. Hopefully you guys had good conversations. So before we get started talking more about the, you know, what you found out with your MVPs, I want to just give us a chance to download a little bit. I'm curious about what some of your needs, preferences, and values are. So if you can find on your Zoom toolbar, there's a little annotate feature. If you click on that, it'll pull up another toolbar where you can find the text tool, and you can write on top of this image. So go ahead and feel free to use that to add any of the needs, preferences, and values that you identified for yourself.
Is it just called annotate?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Left bottom. Okay, well,
Yeah, on my left bottom is just audio and video. Let me see.
You don't
yeah,
see
I
it?
don't
using-
see that as well.
I'm using a Mac, and if I hover above the audio mute unmute, there's like a green pencil that shows up. That's the annotate tool for me. If others see that.
Yeah, that's it.
It's doing that on my Windows too.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Yay.
Sorry about the
Yeah.
line. I'm working on getting it out.
No worries. Yeah, there's like a little text tool, and there's also like an arrowhead, which I believe will allow you to click on your message and move it around.
Wait, how does it work again for Mac? Because I can't find it.
There's 3 dots above Giovanna's name. If you click on that at the very bottom, it'll say annotate.
This is so much.
Is there a way of making the font smaller? Because we're not gonna all fit.
I'm
I
not sure
tried
about
doing
that.
that too. It didn't seem to work.
If you see any that are already there, feel free to skip. Okay, great. Feel free to continue. I'm just gonna start reading off some of these. So for needs, good mentorship match, pay, your family, healthcare, someone who has good communication, supervisor or PI, partner concerns, an environment that values lived experience, and a strong network of support, I would imagine, or mentoring, and a position that has funding. I assume that also means like stability is a need. Good. And then preferences, we have things like weather, not super cold. I'm with you on that. That was a preference of mine, but it was something I, had to give up. Flexible schedule, you can sacrifice a little bit on that. Hobbies, cool science, however you define cool. Paid time off, weather, climate, competitive stipend, the type of neighborhood you're living in, flexibility, creativity, and support. So these are things that you would be good to have, great to have, not necessarily need to have. And then in terms of values, you have collaborative environments, environments that value social justice, taking care of yourself, personal well-being, family-oriented, listener, detail-oriented, organizer, integrity, respect, believes in diversity, equity, and inclusion, healthy boundaries, work-life balance. Great. Okay. Wonderful. And desire to mentor. Thank you guys for sharing these. Now, I would love to hear a little bit about maybe something you found surprising by going through this exercise. And also whether it clarified some things for you in terms of the career that you were leaning towards.
I think for me, it made me realize how little I've taken my personal life and like happiness into consideration with like everything that I do. I filled out, I did the activity and then realized I wrote down like, I don't know, just like a bunch of things. Like it was like a whole page full. And like not a single one on that page had like to do with me as a person. They were all like very, I don't know, the feel was very corporate America. And I was like, when did you become this person? Because then I watched the end of the video and they're like, what makes you feel happy? And I'm like, oh, I missed the mark. Because it's just like you fall into this mentality of like, I need to do whatever needs to be done to get where I want to go. And then a lot of times if you like weren't, I want to say like, if it was unlikely that you were going to end up in academia or grad school, the process of getting there is usually like kind of uncomfortable and isolating. And so you just get used to being uncomfortable and isolated. So you just expect that that's how it's going to be forever. And that kind of changes how you approach things. So the idea that it can be a happier experience, I was like, oh, I might need to like reevaluate all of it.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. It seems like that's I think the tricky thing about the putting things in the preference category when they're really needs. If you're, willing to compromise them temporarily, the boundary, the horizon might be shifting as you're doing that. But that's a good realization, Sabrina. Did you go back into your list and change some things?
Yeah, I definitely switched a couple things around and then moved some stuff from like preferences to needs because I realized there were definitely things I had categorized under preferences where I was like, if I don't have these things, I will 100% burn out. But like, I've kind of just gotten used to working like that or doing things like that. And it's like a cycle of, I'm going to put up with this for as long as I can till I burn out and then reset and start the pattern again. And I was like, perhaps not. Perhaps we could just like not do that for another 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. The transition points can be very, very stressful, but they can also be, if you look at them from a certain light, they're an opportunity, like you said, to reset, and to, hit the pause button and try things in a different way. So I'm glad you got a chance to do that. Anyone else want to share something they found out when they went through this exercise? Kiki.
So I realized when I was going through the videos that I didn't have words for what I was doing, but I kind of did this when I was applying for PhDs. So I was already thinking ahead of what I wanted my PhD to look like at the time, wanting, you know, good mentorship, wanting to have like the work-life balance and all of that. And then now fast forward to where I'm at now, where I do have, you know, I do have it good compared to maybe what would have happened if I ended up with that PI that I thought I was going to work with. But realizing that there's still a lot of things that are just completely not quite hitting the needs, preferences, or values like currently. And then me thinking ahead of like, okay, it was more of an introspection, I think, exercise of like, I'm doing this exercise for like the next step, but also kind of taking a step back and thinking about where I was like 3 years ago now, I guess, about what those were and how they morphed and what kind of moved from what category to the other category. And then also just recognizing that some of those have not been met currently and trying to see like what I can do to shift those things even now before I even think about, you know, the next career stage. And so maybe that'll help me just build the foundation and really, really understand what it is that I do need, prefer, and value. So I don't know, I thought that was an interesting thing to like feel while I was doing this.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, it's true. For many of you that you still have a year and a half, 2 years left in your PhD. So it's a significant amount of time that you can, you know, after having gone through this exercise, you can start shifting things in the now, and not, you know, just waiting until the next step. But Kiki or anyone else, did you find, you know, since you had gone through a similar reflection when you were choosing your PhD or your PhD lab, have your needs, preferences, and values changed from when you started, Adriana?
Yeah, I think I find it very interesting because I agree with what Kiki was saying. I think they have changed. I was talking with Edwin about it. Like, I had never really cared about location, where I went institution wise, as long as I got kind of what I wanted. I also didn't really care about financial, like I cared about obviously having a stipend, but I didn't really care about a lab that had money or not. That wasn't a priority for me because I was in a lab that didn't have that much money, so I felt like I could handle it no matter what. But now that I am in a lab that does have money, I'm kind of like realizing, oh, it is a little bit easier. It does ease up my mental health. Like I don't have to be worrying about using a reagent. I was just talking about this with Edwin. Like I don't have to worry about using a reagent that is super expensive. Like if it goes wrong, it went wrong. So like I don't have it as tough maybe as some other people who those labs don't have those kind of resources. So I think that in the future now I'm more considerate of like the things I'm looking in a lab, where before I didn't really look. I know people at Mayo look at like the NIH list and see how much money they have. That wasn't something I did because my institution already gave me funding for 5 years. So I think those are things I'm learning from other people that I hadn't paid attention. And also like kind of valuing what I am getting that other people are not getting. So it's something I'm starting to see new areas that I need and that also that I need to appreciate that I have. So kind of maintain.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you become more knowledgeable of a particular career path, you will, you know, come up with additional needs or preferences that, you know, you might want to have in that particular career path. It's a little bit hard sometimes from looking at from the outside. One thing that I would advise is to really think about what that core need is. So, you know, a lab having funding could be, it's an indication of other things that might be one of your core needs. So it might be an indication that, you know, that you will not have to worry about, you know, your position suddenly, like, you know, losing support and you having to find another position. It could also be an indication of the training environment or the science that the lab is doing. So think a little bit more about what is your need and not necessarily what how to measure that. And Josh, I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I did, but it was kind of just a small point. My one thing that I decided that I didn't care about when I was applying to grad school was I was pretty much desensitized to doing some of the animal research. I just knew that it was a big part of what I was going to have to do, and I kind of accepted it. Now that we're talking about choices and being able to have preferences, I would much rather do projects that have little to no animal research involved. Actually, if I'm being completely honest, I'm realizing that the bench isn't as important to me. I love being able to do stuff at the bench, but I've been at the bench for a long time. The more I can get into more communicable projects, things that I can actually present to the public without there being that like having to go through the outrage portion of doing animal-based research and all of that stuff. I feel like doing non-animal-based research would be easier to communicate, and that's kind of where my focuses are. So as far as something that's changed over the years, I'd say my preferences have gone to more communicable projects and projects that don't make me feel as bad when I'm doing them, because that can get a little taxing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I kind of put my hand out, because it's not really it's not a bright point of anybody's research that has to do it. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously some people are, more okay with it than others, but it's that knowing yourself, that's the important piece. What you're comfortable with, like you said, what you would be taxing on a daily basis for you. That's something important to understand and take into account. My final question is, what about the values? Did thinking about values, was that helpful in thinking about your current career path, Paula?
I have to lower my voice because it's 2 a.m. here and I don't want to wake up the people. But I think for me it was like easier to start with the values because they're basically, I don't know, like my compass, and like starting from there was very like useful, because then everything else was like making reference to those values. But what was very difficult was like the preferences, when I had to like, since everything was like aligned with my values, when I had to like decide if it was a preference or not, I was struggling. It was something that I was struggling with. For example, if my value was like serving people, but I want to do it with clinical work, then I was thinking like, well, like if my value is serving people, I can still do it with animals or with something else. So that was basically how I was at the end deciding if it was a preference or not. And I don't know, I realized that everything was really important. Everything that I wrote was like meaningful. So that was something that, when I had to decide if it was a negotiable or non-negotiable thing, at the end, I think I was sacrificing a little bit what I wanted, more than the reason why I am doing it. So yeah, but the values, I really like the values component here.
Yeah. And that's a good point, I think, that Paula brings up. With the values, I think it's very important for you to know what those are, but it's also important to realize that, like Paula said, there's many ways of respecting, honoring those values. So one thing that I would advise you is, when you have informational interviews, when you talk to people to explore potential career paths, you might want to think about how, integrating some questions that relate to those values and how, might that person, how they see those values reflected in that career. And it could be, in a range of different ways. Edwin.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I just wanted to add to the part of considering the values. To me, watching these videos was a bit different because I was watching them after I got my
Yeah.
interview. So it was like, wait, let me see if I did some things right. Some I didn't, but that's okay. But I found myself when looking for a postdoc, science became secondary. Like I was willing to negotiate the type of science I was willing to do as long as the core values of the lab like made me happy, made me productive. And as I find myself, like I'm writing my thesis, scheduling the defense and everything right now, like I started getting a lot of anxiety, like my mental health was all over the place. Like I was getting even depressed writing my thesis. But as soon as like I met the lab, got the interview and like saw the values, the lab dynamic, how everything was, like science was the least of my concern. I just saw like the lab core values, everything just went away. Like I am pumped, I'm writing my thesis like happily. I'm excited for it. Like it was like a 180 degrees, like just because the values met everything that I wanted as a postdoc. Now I'm looking forward to defending my thesis, and it's no longer like a sad moment.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm glad it's not a sad moment. Thank you, Edwin. Iris.
I just wanted to like follow up a little bit on what Paula said and also ask Edwin a question, because I think something that we were talking about and Kimberly and I were talking about was, I think when we were thinking ahead and sort of like planning backwards, at least for myself, I want to like pursue like an academic sort of like I'm down for an academic trajectory, but I think at the same time, I'm also open to other opportunities. And I think something that is I think would be difficult would be like if I'm talking to a PI, because I think most PIs that are interested or like willing to mentor somebody who's doing something academic, that's sort of like all they're willing to do. And I just worry that if I ever express interest in something else, they might not mentor me in the same way or like help me search for those opportunities in the same way. So I'm not sure if you're doing like going down the same trajectory. I wonder like is that something you even thought about, and how would you like navigate that? And also everyone else.
Yeah, like at least in my case, like my goals after my postdoc like were always pretty clear. Like I want to have like my own lab, like run a research team. And in all of my interviews except one, like all the PIs were very supportive. Like I asked them like point blank, I wasn't afraid of asking any questions. One of the questions is like, do you mind, like, is it an issue if I want to just teach or go to industry? Like, how do you view my goals? And 3 out of the 4 PIs I got interviewed were like, I don't care what you do in the sense, like, I will support you regardless. I will cater my mentorship. Like if you want to run a lab, I will focus on grant writing, team management. If you want to teach, I'm going to give you like a lot of mentoring opportunities, teaching opportunities. And to me, that was a really green flag. The one who told me like, well, I prefer if you have a lab. Other than that, like, then I don't know how to mentor you. Then I knew that probably that wasn't the lab I wanted to go to. But like, I asked because I knew that this is an issue. So I asked like, is it an issue what my career goals are? And everyone answered very honestly.
Yeah, that's great. That's so the second part of the strategic postdoc, which we'll discuss next year. But if you want to start, looking ahead, if you're already interviewing for postdocs like Edwin is, I encourage you to go ahead and look ahead. It talks about how to bring in those needs, preferences, and values into the decision-making process, into the interviewing, the assessing the different potential postdoc labs or next steps, and how to assess, you know, how to bring up those questions. All right, so in the last time that we have left, we're gonna talk a little bit about how to use some of this reflection that you went through and apply it to starting to think about your next step. So in the videos, Nalidi and Lawrence advise to use a backward designs method, to start with the end in mind and then work backwards, particularly with respect to the decision of whether or not to do a postdoc. Starting with the end in mind, understanding the type of career that at this moment, at least, you think would be an ideal career path or a career path of interest to you. And then looking to see if a postdoc would help you advise, or what type of next position would help you move towards that career. So that's the exercise that hopefully you got a chance to do a little bit in the videos and that I want you to discuss with your peer mentor. So in the next few minutes, talk about what type of ideal career are you currently leaning towards? And if you still don't know, if you're still unclear, that's okay. It's just a sign that you need to do a little bit more career exploration. And so you can talk a little bit about what type of career exploration you may want to do. Discuss, you know, where you are right now in terms of your assessment of whether a postdoc is needed for that ideal career. Will it really help you? Will it serve you? What type of postdoc? Remember, there are different types of postdocs. What type of postdoc might you need to do to move forward? And in particular, what type of skills, resources, or knowledge would you like to gain in your next step? You know, if you're looking towards an academic teaching position, teaching focused position, then the type of postdoc you might want to do would be different than if you're looking for an industry position, or if you're looking for, you know, to start a research lab at an R1 institution. So we're going to open up the breakout rooms again, and we'll give you another, well, we're already at 8:10. We're going to give you 15 minutes to have this conversation. So, you know, divide it amongst the two of you, and we'll see you guys at 8:25. Hello. Hello.
You know what? I'll go get him for the last bit. It's okay. He won't.
All right, I think we're all back. Okay, so we're running low on time, so we won't really have time to go through and discuss your backward designs, but I am curious to know how many of you feel at this point that you have a pretty good idea of the type of career you're leaning towards, or at least a family of careers you're leaning towards. So raise your hand if that's the case for you. Okay, about half. It's always half. And I assume other people are still in the career exploration phase. So good news. Our next sessions are going to be focused on that, on career exploration and on setting a plan for moving forward in terms of deciding what your next step should be. So the next conversation we're going to have will be Wednesday, September 11th. And actually, that's going to be a panel with YCA alumni who have recently completed their PhD. You might see some familiar faces from our most recent cohort. And that will be a good panel for you guys to not just talk about what their decision process was like when they were finishing their PhD and thinking of their next step, but also to discuss a little bit some of the other parts of the strategic postdoc video that we didn't talk about. Nalidi and Lawrence also talk a lot about the conflicting roles of research advisors and mentors, and how those sometimes can really come into play, particularly when you're finishing your PhD, when interests might come into conflict. So I think that will be a really wonderful opportunity for you guys to discuss that with near peers that have gone through that process recently. And then our next meetings are going to be September 23rd and October 16th. And for those meetings, you guys should start looking at our next video course, which focuses on career planning. This video course is taught by Cynthia Furman. She is one of our national treasures, I'd like to call her, but she's one of the experts on individual development plan and on really helping students not just focus their PhD on gaining research skills, but also helping them through the process of thinking of what that PhD is for, what they want to, how do they want to apply that training into a career. She's really someone who has really, made policy changes and made changes in the way that we think about research training, PhD training, and the importance of career planning in that process. So she's going to be teaching you through the video, but we're going to also bring her back at least for one of those conversations so that we can put into play some of the things that she talks about in the video. So please start taking a look at that. Just like the previous one, it's not a huge amount, it's not really, the videos aren't super long, but it really helps if you spread them out and have a chance to do some of the exercises as you're going through them. And so we'll be able to talk a little bit more in those sessions about where you currently are in terms of your career planning, and how you can create actionable objectives for you to start, exploring what careers you might be interested in, getting information to help you, decide if that's a career that you're interested in, and start the process of setting up that next step. Okay. Are there any questions or comments before we leave? It was really wonderful to see everybody. I hope you're having a great summer, and if you had good conversations, feel free to schedule another chat with your peer mentor. I'm sure you guys had a lot of good stuff to talk about. I'm just reading some of your comments in the chat. Very nice to see everybody. Have a wonderful night.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, Rena's cat.
Bye, everyone. Aw.
The animals are the MVP here.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Oh,
true.
wait. You guys too.
Bye.
Night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Bye.